Rain hit the windshield hard enough to blur the world into streaks of silver. I sat in the parking lot outside my father's funeral with almost nothing left in my bank account, and 3 missed calls from a man I owed money. My father had just been buried, and somehow, unbelievably, that wasn't even the worst part of my week. I remember staring at the church doors while people drifted out in black suits and quiet voices, carrying sympathy and umbrellas that turned inside out in the wind. Everybody kept saying the same things. Your father was a good man. He built so much. He'd be proud of you. That last one almost made me laugh. Because if my father could see my life at that moment, proud was probably not the word he would have chosen. I was 27 years old, living in an apartment I could barely afford, drowning in debt nobody knew about, wearing a watch I bought to impress people who didn't even like me. The kind of man who talked loudly about big opportunities because silence would have forced him to admit he had absolutely no idea what he was doing. And now, one person who could have saved me was gone. Or so I thought. Because not long after, I was sitting in the office of my father's lawyer. I found out my dead father had one final plan for me, and it would either save my life or completely destroy the person I had become. The rain kept falling long after the funeral ended, and while people drove home to warm houses and ordinary evenings, I sat alone in that parking lot thinking about how exactly my life had fallen apart before I ever turned 30. Because the truth is, none of this started with my father's death.
My name is Ethan Cole, and if you had seen me 6 months earlier, you probably would have thought I was doing well. Sharp clothes, good apartment, always on the phone, always working on something. I had mastered the art of looking successful exactly 3 years before I actually became broke. That is a surprisingly common skill in cities. From the outside, my life looked polished. From the inside, I was a man standing on ice, listening to it crack beneath him while pretending not to hear anything at all. The latest investment deal had failed badly. Not regular bad. The kind of bad that arrives quietly at first and then suddenly begins calling your phone at 2 a.m. I owed money. Real money. Not just to banks, to people. People become much less inspirational when you owe them money. I had spent 6 years chasing shortcuts, fast money, fast success, fast respect. I told myself I was smarter than the slow road, smarter than sacrifice, smarter than patience. My father had spent 20 years building his real estate business, brick by brick. I planned to build mine with presentations and confidence. Turns out that in my own situation, confidence is a terrible building material.
My mother left when I was 12. Not dramatically. No screaming, no broken plates, no movie scene. She left slowly, like a room losing heat. Just 2 tired people slowly running out of warmth for each other. My father worked. My mother waited. Eventually, she got tired of waiting. She needed presence. My father only knew how to provide protection. He never chased her, never explained it to me. Looking back now, I think that may have been the saddest thing I had ever seen. After she left, the house changed. The house suddenly felt very large for 2 people who didn't know how to talk to each other. Silence became the wall between us, and over the years, we both kept adding bricks to it. Him with his long hours, me with my resentment, until we were 2 people sharing the same story without ever truly meeting inside it. We lived beside each other like polite strangers connected by history. I was 27 when the phone rang, and everything changed. My father had been feeling tired for months, losing weight. He thought it was stress. By the time the doctors found what was actually wrong, stage 4 pancreatic cancer, it had already spread further than anyone could stop. When I walked into his hospital room for the first time, the smell of disinfectant, machines humming softly, my father sitting upright in bed, somehow looking stronger than the room around him. "You didn't have to drive all the way here," he told me. "You have cancer," I replied. "Where else would I be?" For a second, something passed across his face. Not sadness, almost surprise, like he hadn't expected me to come. That thought hurts. Before I left the hospital, he handed me an envelope. "Open after," he said. "After what?" He looked at me for a long moment. "After you are ready to hear me." I opened it later, in my car, under a flickering parking lot light. My hands shook while I unfolded the paper, not because I thought there would be money inside, because somewhere underneath all the resentment and distance, I still wanted my father to speak to me. Really speak to me. And for the first time in years, he finally did.
"Ethan, you know I was never good with words. Your mother used to say I treated conversations like emergency exits, only to be used when absolutely necessary." She was not entirely wrong. There are many things I should have said to you years ago. I kept believing there would be more time. Life punishes that belief more often than people admit. I know there is distance between us. I know I helped build it. But I need you to understand something clearly before I go. Every single thing I built was built with you in mind. Every property, every deal, every exhausted drive home. I just never learned how to say love out loud, so I tried to build it instead. That was my failure, not yours. There are things I still want to teach you, not because you are incapable, because I know who you can become if you slow down long enough to meet yourself honestly. Mr. Osei will explain the rest after I'm gone. I love you. I should have said it more, Dad.
I read the letter 3 times. Then I sat there in the rain with my forehead against the steering wheel, while something painful and ancient cracked quietly open inside my chest. Not because the letter fixed everything. It didn't. Some wounds are too old for that. But for the first time in my life, my father had opened a door instead of building another wall. And even though it happened far too late, it still mattered. He died 11 weeks later, and 1 week after the funeral, I learned the letter was only the beginning. Mr. Osei's office smelled like old books and expensive patience. He had been my father's lawyer for over 20 years, always speaking like a man placing fragile objects onto shelves. I sat across from him in my black funeral suit, pretending I was grieving normally, trying not to think about the messages piling up on my phone and overdue bills. But in reality, part of my brain was doing math. The business, the accounts, the properties, the inheritance my father left behind, and how badly I needed it. "Your father left you everything," Mr. Osei said. For one beautiful second, I could breathe again. Then he added, "with conditions." And just like that, the oxygen left the room. He placed a thick folder onto the desk, then a USB drive beside it. "Your father recorded 4 video messages before he passed," he explained. "Each one contains a task. Complete all 4 tasks and the estate becomes legally yours. Refuse any of them and everything transfers to the charitable foundation he established years ago." What about the accounts? Locked. The properties? Held in trust. The cars? Technically still cars, Mr. Osei said gently, but also inaccessible. I stared at him. My father had managed to remove every shortcut from my life from beyond the grave. Honestly, it was impressive. Infuriating, but impressive. "And if I say no?" "Then you walk away with nothing." I picked up the drive anyway, because what else was I supposed to do? I had run out of good options months ago. That night I sat alone in my father's study. The house felt strange without him. Not empty, occupied by absence. His jacket still hung near the doorway. A coffee mug still sat beside a stack of papers. Books lined the shelves exactly the way he liked them, like the house itself hadn't yet realized he wasn't coming back. I plugged in the USB drive. The screen flickered, and suddenly my father was there again, alive. Tired, yes, but alive. "Ethan," he said softly, "if you're watching this, then you decided to stay." He smiled faintly. "Good. Leaving has become very popular lately. I'm not going to lecture you," he continued. God knows I avoided enough conversations while I was alive. So instead, I'm going to show you what took me most of my life to learn. He leaned forward slightly. The first gift is work. Real work. Not meetings, not talking, not pretending to be busy while secretly refreshing your bank account. Go to the Mapele Street property tomorrow morning. Ask for Joseph. He already knows you're coming. The video ended. The room went dark, and for the first time in years, I had absolutely no idea what my life was supposed to look like next. The next morning arrived too early and far too hot. Construction sites, I learned very quickly, do not care about grief, or hangovers, or emotional breakthroughs. Joseph looked me up and down exactly once. That was all he needed. "You're Ethan," he said. That contained an entire biography's worth of judgment. He handed me gloves. "Your father said to put you on the hardest job, basement cleanup. It's been flooded. Smells like 30 years of bad decisions. Start cleaning." The basement was awful. Not poetically awful, actually awful. Mud, water damage, broken pipes, rotting wood. A smell so aggressive it felt personal. By lunchtime, my back hurt. By evening, my hands blistered. By day 3, I discovered muscles I genuinely believe had been inactive since childhood. The first week nearly broke me. Not because the work was impossible, because it was honest. Nobody there cared who I used to think I was. And strangely, that became freeing. By the second week, I stopped checking my phone every 3 minutes. By the third week, I started arriving early. Not because anyone asked me to, because something about the rhythm of honest work quieted the noise in my head. The second video was quieter. There is a family living in the Crescent Road flat. The Mensas. 4 months behind on rent. My accountant wants them removed. I want you to meet them first, not as tenants, as people. Then decide what kind of man you want to be. The video ended. No instructions, no answer. Just responsibility, which, annoyingly, was becoming my father's favorite hobby. On the drive there, Tunde called, an old contact from my shortcut years, the kind of man who always sounded one conversation away from either becoming rich or getting arrested, sometimes both. "My guy," he said, "I heard about the inheritance situation. That's rough. But listen, there are easier ways around these things." "Not interested." "You haven't heard the offer yet." That sentence alone is usually a bad sign. He laughed. "You're becoming dramatic. Your father dies and suddenly you're a philosopher?" I almost snapped back. Instead, I hung up. But his words followed me anyway. There are easier ways. That sentence had basically been my religion for 6 years. Crescent Road sat on the quieter side of the city. Faded paint, narrow balconies, laundry moving gently in the wind like tired little flags. The kind of place people stop noticing once they become successful enough to avoid living there. Adwa Mensa opened the apartment door holding exhaustion together with pure discipline. Behind her, 2 children peeked around the hallway corner. She looked at me once and immediately understood why I was there. "Mr. Cole," she said, "I know why you're here." She explained everything without excuses. "My husband starts work next week," she said before I could speak. "We are not trying to escape what we owe." I sat with them for 2 hours. I learned my father had quietly reduced their rent years earlier when their youngest child became sick. Not as charity, just because it was the right thing to do. I learned dignity has a very recognizable shape when you finally see it up close. And I learned that people become very different once you stop viewing them as obstacles. They had lived there 8 years without missing a payment before this. Ajwa made homemade bread at night to help cover expenses, and sometimes people are carrying battles so heavy you can actually feel the weight of them sitting in the room. When I left, I sat in my car for a long time. Then I called the property office. "Clear their debt," I said. "I'll handle it personally." That night, I stared at my apartment ceiling, thinking about all the meaningless things I had spent money on over the years trying to look successful, and how little money it actually took to help someone breathe easier. "Go to Asaba," my father's third video said softly. "Speak to my sister, Chisholm. If you want to understand me, you must first understand what I was running from." Asaba felt like stepping into another rhythm of life. Red earth roads, children shouting somewhere nearby, women selling fruit beneath faded umbrellas, a smell of dust and heat and cooking oil drifting through the air. It felt like stepping into the childhood my father never talked about. Auntie Chisholm sat outside shelling beans when I arrived. She looked at me for 3 seconds. Then she said, "Oh, wow. You look exactly like your father." She pointed toward the bench beside her. "Sit." She told me stories for hours, stories my father never shared, about poverty, about fear, about nights my father studied beneath streetlights because the electricity failed, about their father drinking away money they didn't have, about my grandmother working herself half to death trying to keep the family fed. Then she said something I don't think I'll ever forget. "Your father was afraid his entire life." My father never seemed afraid of anything. "Not the kind you can see," she clarified. "He was afraid of becoming his father, afraid of failing the people he loved, afraid of not providing enough. That fear became work, and eventually the work became the only language he knew for love." Suddenly every late night made sense. Every missed birthday, every exhausted silence. My father wasn't worshiping work. He was terrified. Terrified of failure, terrified of instability, terrified of watching the people he loved suffer the way his mother had suffered. "But fear is tricky," Auntie Chisholm said softly. "Sometimes people run so hard from becoming one thing, they accidentally become another kind of lonely instead." That sentence stayed inside me like a bell, and for the first time since the funeral, I cried. Not loudly, not dramatically, because grief is a strange thing. Sometimes you don't truly lose someone until the moment you finally understand them. The final video was recorded close to the end. My father looked smaller now, fragile, but his eyes remained steady. "Last one, Ethan. I don't want you to complete a task this time. I want you to answer a question." "Ethan," he said quietly, "what do you want to build?" He shook his head gently. "Not own, build. There is a difference. Because legacy is not what someone leaves behind," he continued. "Legacy is what someone continues." Then, right before the video ended, he added, "And call your mother. Some silences become too expensive if you leave them unpaid too long." The screen faded black. I sat there alone in the study. The question stayed with me for weeks. What do you want to build? Not what impresses people, not what makes money fastest, not what looks successful from outside. What actually matters? It turned out answering that question honestly changes everything. 3 weeks later, I stood inside the Mapele Street building with Joseph, Mr. Osei, and a handful of people who had spent years believing in my father. I looked around the room, the unfinished walls, the sunlight pouring through dusty windows, the future waiting patiently inside the concrete. Then I said, "I don't want to sell this place." Joseph nodded once. "Good start. I want to turn the ground floor into affordable workspace. Tailors, carpenters, small businesses, people who need somewhere to begin." The room went quiet. "The goal isn't maximizing profit immediately. The goal is building something useful that lasts." "Your father would have liked that," Joseph said. And hearing those words affected me more than I expected. Because all my life, I thought I wanted my father's money. What I actually wanted was his respect. That night, I called my mother. The phone rang twice. "Ethan?" Her voice sounded older, softer, like time had sanded away the sharp edges grief leaves behind. "Hi, Mom," I said. "I think we should talk." And somewhere far away, I could almost hear another wall beginning to crack. 1 week later, I returned to Mr. Osei's office. Mr. Osei reached into his desk drawer and handed me one final envelope. "Your father asked me to give you this after everything was complete." My name was written across the front in my father's careful handwriting. I opened the envelope carefully.
Ethan, if you are reading this, then you finished. I believed you would, not because you are perfect. God knows neither of us were ever in danger of that. But because underneath all your restlessness, there was always something steady waiting to emerge. I spent too many years believing that providing for people was the same thing as being emotionally present for them. I understand now those are different gifts. You deserved both. Your mother leaving broke something inside me I never properly repaired. Instead of healing it, I buried myself in work and called that responsibility. That distance between us was never your fault. Please hear me clearly when I say that. The business and properties belong to you now, but they were never the real inheritance. The real inheritance is this, that you can build something honest, that you can keep showing up when things become difficult, that you can choose integrity even when shortcuts are easier, that you can grieve deeply without allowing grief to harden you, and that becoming a good man happens quietly, choice by choice, long before anyone notices. Be patient with yourself, Ethan. Strong foundations take time, and somewhere, I hope, I will get to watch what you build next. I love you, Dad.
Several weeks later, the Mapele Street building reopened. What used to be a flooded basement was now alive with light. A tailor pinned fabric beside the front windows. A carpenter arranged tools carefully across a workbench. The smell of fresh paint mixed with food cooking somewhere nearby. Children ran through the hall. Across the street, I watched quietly with my hands in my pockets. The building was alive now. Not because of ownership, because of purpose. And suddenly I understood the final lesson. My father never cared most about buildings. He cared about what people became inside them. My father left me properties, a business, money, plenty of it. But those were never the real inheritance. The real inheritance was learning that a meaningful life is not built from shortcuts. It is built slowly, patiently, by showing up, by choosing people, by choosing integrity, by choosing to stay present long enough for love to become visible, even when it arrives late. Especially then. And sometimes, if you are very lucky, someone leaves behind one final gift. Not answers, a question. What do you want to build? I am still answering it, one morning at a time.